finding your true self or finding your authentic self? Which should it be? I would say both, because both have a positive outcome. But I guess as a way of understanding what the authentic self is and what the true self is, as like, say, for example, the true self can be seen in the spiritual or religious sense, but there's a bit of a catch-22 in finding the true self, and I'll explain that later. A good starting point to actually understand what is the authentic self is what the inauthentic self is. And the inauthentic self is when we are developing, growing up as kids into adults. We tend to be shaped by our environment to fit into certain environments, be it family, friends, bosses, jobs, relationships, friendships, all these sorts of things. We need to, in order to survive, kind of fit in. If some of what we hold dear, our belief systems, who we are as people, our tendencies, our tastes, what brings us joy, if that is in opposition to actually what we're actually trying to conform into, then there's parts of ourselves that were authentic to us that we start to, I guess, in a way, deform. We start to depress or suppress parts of ourselves in order to fit in. It may feel rather inauthentic to oneself. It's kind of like having that gut instinct of like, I don't feel this is right for me, sort of thing. It's like, but everyone else is doing it, and if I don't do it, then like I'll be left out. And then that left out on a survival thing is like, I've got to fend for myself now. So it's best, even though it doesn't feel good to me, to actually do what goes against my own true nature, my own value system, my own beliefs. And sometimes that is a form of emotional suppression. And that emotional suppression or depression, to not express oneself freely, like EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, to not express someone's self freely, starts to feel confined or constricted or suppressed within oneself, and the emotional flows on to the physical. That can lead to health symptoms and mental health symptoms and physical health symptoms, and even autoimmune disorders, for example, as the amount of stress of having to do what is against oneself, or on a relationship sense, having to suppress who you are in order to, like that saying, keep up with the Joneses, or keep up appearances, or keep up that mask of a different value system to fit into a group of people that, you know, may have also trying to fit in. It's kind of like everyone's trying to fit into something that is not made for them. Or in another sense, it's kind of like the old square peg in a round hole, but in order for that square peg to fit in the right round hole, it needs to deform itself away or conform into something that is not its true nature or its authentic self. And notice how I keep saying true nature and authentic self, which is slightly different to the true self. But true as in what feels true to you, like listening to that gut instinct of like, I don't think I enjoy this, or my boundary is getting crossed, or I'm having to people please in order to keep them pleased, but I'm displeased by keeping them pleased, sort of thing, and this doesn't make me feel nice inside. If you have to like grin and bear it for a long amount of time, it's like, what are you actually bearing? Is it pain? Is it emotional discontent towards others? That is what is sitting within the body, and trauma stores in the body. So staying true to your authentic self is kind of like going on a recovery journey, because if we're having to, I guess in a way metaphorically, cutting off parts of our identity in order to conform into something so we can feel that we are part of something. But it's the recovery of those parts that we have lost. And in that recovery, finding who you were again, where did I get lost along the way? What makes me feel authentically good? What do I want to now live to my own values? What do I want to do that makes me happy? In that journey, in your environment, if you've had to conform into an environment, there may be a letting go of this that happens to people, friends, bosses, relationship sort of thing, because if we've conformed into an environment that has not allowed the expression of oneself, then it's either I don't want to say always, where like you always have to leave a sort of a situation, but I guess it's like if the culture is toxic, you can either try to change the culture or try and change yourself. So in an authentic, finding your authentic self can mean also rejoining with those parts that you weren't allowed, and that what is not allowing you to do that either gains an awareness themselves, or there is a going away from that. Not always, and I'm not saying that that's what you need to do. I'm just saying as an awareness. Some situations it's as simple as agreeing to disagree. It doesn't mean that you disrespect the other person, it's just you hold a different value system to them, but you still encompass them as a friend relationship and all that. But in some regards, it's if you don't agree to what I'm agreeing to, you're banished, or if you disagree to that, you're banished, sort of thing. It's an excluding thing. So that's the authentic self. It's basically finding and expressing what matters to you, and no longer doing things that emotionally or physically suppress you as a person. There are many different ways to recover oneself. There are many different modalities to recover oneself. No one way is the best way. So the next part is the true self. Now, the true self, as I said, can be seen in the religious or spiritual sense. And to give an understanding of what I mean about finding the true self can be a catch-22, because it's finding a self that has no self. And to understand that is to ask yourself the question, like, who were you before you were born? And reflecting upon that. And then if that's a bit tricky, like there is a point when you are sleeping that it's a dreamless state. So how do you identify when there is nothing to identify with? But it is the best way to wake up fresh and anew. There's a point in your sleep where conscious control is let go of, and you are kind of in a nothingness in a way, a non-identifying state. Another way to think about this is in a meditation sense. When you go into the process, like you may be guided into the process, but it's also a process of non-identification. So that non-identification can look like, okay, closing your eyes, taking in your environment, what can you hear, and not attaching any names or meaning to what you're hearing, and then going through your senses, what can you smell, feel, all these sorts of things, taste, and not identifying, creating a narrative to those or attaching meaning to that. And then even your thoughts as they bubble up, sort of thing, like trying not to attach or even forcibly let go of a thought, merely observing until you get to a point where you're kind of like, as I've said before in the moments of stillness videos, kind of like a radio tuning into a signal, but you're not forcibly tuning in. You're not trying to find Or you could look at it as like you're an open window frame where things flow through you. Now, in this, all I've said there is don't get attached to things. Don't get attached to an identity. Don't try and force away. Don't try and do things, because that is the self trying to do something, trying to attach past experiences, trying to find something. You're identifying with something, and as soon as you start to identify to find your true self, it actually takes you away from your true self. It's a state of stillness. It's a state of things passing through you, like just being receptive to that, and whatever that is, if you give it a name, then you're identifying with that. So that's where the catch-22 is. To find your true self, the self is a selfless state. It's merely well, to give it a name identifies it. It's something that is formless or nameless, and you're merely being present in that stillness, like being present in that moment, being present in a stillness of a stateless state. If you chuck a pebble into water, the water is all rippled and all that, but then it settles, it stills, and this state is like a going in and out of. Now, if you take it even out of meditation, or take it out of sleep, or take it out of before you're born, it's kind of like that flow state as well. And then that flow state is that effortless action where you almost lose your identity and go into actually you're just doing in that moment, and everything just comes together. And that coming together is you and something that is beyond you, but you kind of have to lose you in a way in order to be that, because as soon as you identify in that, you separate from that. So in a sense of a unification, because either in a religious or a scientific sense, you came from the universe, be it atoms, cells, or energy forms. You came from that. You are a part of that, and I want to stress you are a part of that, not that singular. If you pour powder into water, sort of thing, it becomes with the water. It's not separate to the water. It blends in with it, and maybe that's a word to you. It blends in where you aren't the main ingredient. You're part of the main ingredient, and you allow the process rather than trying to focus or identify with the process, because that gets in the way of the process. So that's where the catch-22 lies, is to find your true self is not finding a true self. It's merely tuning into moments where you let go of yourself to be with something. How an authentic self can lead to a true self is that noise that you're hearing, all those voices and all that, is a lot of what we've like been conditioned with, like, oh, I'm not doing this, I need to do this quicker. Oh, he over there, he's gone into the meditative state quicker than me. Or like in yoga, it's like, oh, they can bend a bit more. It's like a competition sort of thing. It's like, I need to be the best, which kind of comes from a Western mindset. Like yoga is a unification. That's what the word means, to be unified, and you're unifying only with yourself and something else, but you need to let go of yourself to actually unify. And by quieting or reconnecting, which actually means unifying, the authentic self also means unifying with the parts that aren't good. We want to push away, like what we view as negative emotions, but it's the negative allowing or reducing the negative emotions allows for the positive. So it means a holistic way of unifying with all of our emotions. And if we can quieten the noise by going into some of these negative emotions, to release, to down-regulate the nervous system on this, then we don't have to force our mind to be quiet in a meditation. We don't have to force things, or we don't have to compete with others, or be the best at this or that sort of thing, or having this like they're bad, they're good mentality. it's reducing the noise on that by down-regulating our own nervous system. That quietens that. And then we become receptive if we go into a state, whether it be a flow state, sleeping state, if you're staying up late at night because you've got all these thoughts racing through your head sort of thing. It's down-regulating that noise, so you can then actually be present not only just with yourself or in a crowded situation or in a meditation state or sleep or go into flow states where you can be creative or do whatever you want. Then you can be a bit more with something. How does one know oneself without experiencing all aspects of oneself, the positive and the negative? The more we resist going into an emotion and focusing and persisting on another one, the louder that emotion gets. So turning down the volume on that noise helps with other aspects of our lives. So yeah, the authentic self and the true self, once again, there's no right or wrong sort of thing. It's just, I guess it's how you want to look at it and a perception, and maybe this is being helpful for you. It's like, once again, going as the authentic self, it's not going to be an easy journey, but it's also a journey that actually assists you to find, I guess, parts that you've lost along the way. And if you're unified with that a bit more, then it helps with like unifying with other aspects in life. So yeah, I'm Leon from Eflowtion Support Services, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.